The movie begins on an island where only cats live. Evil cats attack innocent townspeople, and the shogun sends a samurai to protect the town. Oga, the leader of Ikachu's army, rides to Ikachu's palace and meets him. Ikachu walks around the palace and criticizes the workers. Oga walks to him, and Ikachu informs him that the shogun is coming to visit in a week. He says the shogun is searching for a successor, and he will do everything in his power to get the position. Ikachu looks at Kakamucho, a small village behind the palace, and tells Oga that the village is a problem and wants to remove it because it is ruining his view. He instructs Oga to get rid of the samurai and the villagers. In the village, Imiko and her friends play when they see some bandits approaching. They inform the villagers, and Imiko rushes to get the town's samurai. The villagers cheer as the samurai gets on his horse. The bandits draw nearer, and the samurai runs away. The bandits enter the village and wreak havoc. Yuki, Imiko's mother, addresses the townspeople the following morning and says they'll have to fight to protect their home. They decide to hire another samurai but wonder where they can get one. Imiko says that the shogun appoints samurais, and they should ask him for a samurai. The villagers ignore her, and as Chuck repeats what she says, they give him credit for the idea. The villagers send word to the shogun, Toshi, and inform him they need a new samurai because of the bandit attack. Toshi talks to Ikachu and instructs him to appoint a new samurai for Kakamucho. Ikachu realizes he needs a new plan to eliminate the village. Meanwhile, some guards take a dog named Hank to the execution ground to be executed. They inform him that dogs aren't allowed in their country and say he has to be executed. They arrive at the execution ground, and as Hank tries to escape, he accidentally runs into his cell and is captured. Ikachu decides to send the worst samurai to defend Kakamucho. He hears as Hank says he wants to be a samurai and stops the guards from executing him. Ikachu walks to Hank and appoints him as the samurai of Kakamucho. He places Hank on a horse, gives him a cup with samurai written on it, and sends him to the town. Ikachu informs Oga that the villagers will kill Hank because he is a dog and killing a samurai is a crime. Hank arrives at the village, and the villagers stop celebrating as they realize he is a dog. They try to kill him but find his appointment letter and decide to hate him and not kill him. Hank enters the house made for the samurai and looks around. He sees and plays with some samurai equipment and falls to the ground. Jimbo, a cat, intoxicated by catnip, emerges from a room and introduces himself. Hank tells him he is the new samurai and Jimbo says he isn't a real samurai. Hank admits to not being a real samurai, and the village gets attacked by bandits. Hank tries talking to the bandits, but they knock him out. Hank wakes up eventually, and Jimbo tells him he should go home. Hank says he spent all he had to get to their island to become a samurai. He says he needs a samurai mentor and realizes that Jimbo can train him to be a samurai. Hank tells Jimbo how he was bullied when he was in his hometown, and a strange samurai saved him. Jimbo reveals himself as the samurai who saved him and refuses to help him. Hank gets upset and leaves the building. Jimbo sees Imiko, and she uses her cuteness to convince him to help Hank. Jimbo goes to Hank and makes him agree to be his student and obey all his instructions. He begins training Hank, and Hank has difficulty because Jimbo trains him like he is a cat. That night, Jimbo tells Hank how he ruined his previous master's birthday party because he thought they were being ambushed. He says he broke his samurai oath and left because of the shame. Jimbo returns home that night and realizes he needs to teach Hank differently. Jimbo continues training with Hank the following day and teaches him to master his senses. He instructs Hank to defeat strength with smarts as they train. Meanwhile, Ikachu continues his preparation for the shogun and tells Oga he is a failure and a disappointment. He decides to send the beast to Kakamucho and laughs at his evil plan. Sumo, a giant cat, rides into Kakamucho on a hog. He knocks down all the horses and begins destroying buildings in the village. Hank meets Jimbo and asks him to continue teaching him. Imiko runs in and says that Sumo has arrived and is terrorizing the town. Jimbo tells Hank he isn't ready to fight Sumo, and Imiko decides to fight him. She meets Sumo in a building and uses her skills to fight. Hank saves her from a shield and returns her to her mom. Sumo attacks Hank, and an edamame bean falls on his face. His face swells, and he tells Hank that he is allergic to edamame beans. Sumo knocks Hank around, and Jimbo motivates him. He grabs Hank, and Jimbo throws a bean into his throat. Sump falls to the ground, and Jimbo says they should take Sumo to a doctor. Hank talks to Sumo, and Sumo informs him that no one has ever been nice to him. He decides to live in Kakamucho with Hank. Ichiro and Chuck secretly thank Hank for defeating Sumo and give him presents. Imiko and Yuki arrive and thank Hank for his help as they give him a large bone. Jimbo emerges and says the samurai needs sleep. He informs Hank that he is lucky and shouldn't become proud. Meanwhile, Oga informs Ika-chu that his men don't want to fight Hank because he has defeated Sumo. Ika-chi decides to take care of Hank himself. Hank sits with Imiko and Sumo as they play with origami. Imiko gives Hank an origami of himself and says it will remind him of who he is. Jimbo arrives and tells Hank he needs to continue training. Ika-chu arrives as Hank begins training. He invites Hank to the town to celebrate. He says he wants to take Hank to an exclusive club, and Hank says Jimbo instructs him to train. Ika-chu convinces Hank by saying that Jimbo is boring and wants other people to be boring. Ika-chu drives away, and Hank prepares to have fun with him. Jimbo instructs Hank not to go out with Ika-chu. He tells Hank he is breaking his word if he goes out, and Hank says they can train the following day. Jimbo says he isn't Hank's friend but his teacher. Hank says Jimbo is unhappy and wants everyone else to be unhappy. He brags about defeating Sumo and leaves the house. Jimbo gets upset and begins drinking catnip. He uses his sword to destroy the contract he signed with Hank. Hank meets Ika-chu, and they go to the club. The cats cheer for him as he enters, and the bouncer asks for his autograph. Everyone in the club treats Hank as a special person while bandits attack Kakamucho. The villagers rush to inform Hank, but he is nowhere to be found. Ika-chu pays some of the people in the club and reveals that they are pretending to like Hank. Hank returns to the village the following morning and sees that the village was attacked. Hank rushes to Jimbo, who informs him that ninjas attacked the village while he was having fun with Ika-chu. He tells Hank that they captured Sumo and Hank offers to join him and save Sumo. Jimbo refuses and says that Hank isn't a samurai and is selfish. He gets on his horse and leaves as he rides it backward. The villagers yell at Hank, and he decides to leave. Imiko yells at Hank and says her mom was right that dogs can't be samurais. Hank leaves the village as it rains, and everyone is sad. He sits on a rock and sees the origami figure Imiko gave him. Jimbo sneaks into the palace and grabs Hank as he walks to him. Hank tells him he wants to make things right, and Jimbo asks him to leave. They get surrounded by some guards and work together to take them down. Hank plans to enter the palace, and Jimbo dresses up as a guard. They knock a cat out and make their way into the palace. Hank uses his sharp sense of smell to find Sumo's cell. Jimbo makes a hole in the door, and Hank enters and talks to Sumo. He calls Sumo their friend, and Sumo breaks his restraints as he hugs Hank. Hank, Jimbo, and Sumo make their way to the palace's courtyard. Hank accidentally steps on a cat's tail, and it alerts the other cats. An army appears before them, and Sumo clears a path to the gate. He holds the gate open, and as Hank goes through, Jimbo locks himself inside and says he'll take care of the soldiers. Oga informs Ika-chu that Sumo escaped, and Ika-chu tells him that he already has a plan in motion. Hank and Sumo arrive in Kakamucho and see that the villagers are leaving. He asks what's going on, and Chuck shows him a poster that shows that Ika-chu is hiring criminals to prepare to attack Kakamucho. The evil cat army gathers at the docks, and Ika-chu meets them. Hank talks to the townspeople and tells them that they lost Jimbo to the cat army. He says he wants to regain their trust, and Sumo helps convince the villagers to help him. Hank comes up with a plan and says they can make anything out of folded paper. The evil army assembles, and they fart a lot because they eat a large amount of beans. Ika-chu emerges and instructs the army to go to Kakamucho. Imiko's friends signal to the villagers that the evil army is on its way. The evil army enters the fake town and attacks the origami town and people. Hank instructs Ichiro to shoot the explosives they placed, but he misses his shot with the only bullet he has. Hank sets the origami ablaze and attaches it to an arrow. He uses the arrow to detonate the explosives, and the villagers attack the evil army. While the villagers fight the evil army, the shogun arrives with his army, and Ika-chu meets him. He convinces Toshi to arrest Hank and Jimbo saves him as Oga tries to kill him. Toshi recognizes Jimbo, and Jimbo realizes Toshi is his previous master. He apologizes for ruining his birthday, but Toshi informs him that he made the birthday even better. Jimbo tells Toshi that Hank is protecting the village. Toshi gets confused, and Oga explains Ikachu's evil plan to destroy Kakamucho. Ikachu runs away and goes to the palace. Hank pursues Ikachu, and they arrive at his giant emerald toilet. A fight ensues, and they drop their blades on the ribbon on the toilet. Hank retrieves the blades but gives Ikachu his blade for a fair fight. Ikachu tricks him, and as Hank hangs on the ribbon, he throws his samurai cup at Ikachu. Ikachu pulls the lever as he falls into the toilet, and it flushes. Oga tries saving Ikachu, but they clog the toilet, and water bursts out of the toilet. The water floods the palace, and Hank realizes it will move to Kakamucho. Hank and Jimbo rush to Kakamucho and instruct the people to dig a hole to change the water's direction. Sumo sees that the water is close and rushes to finish digging the hole. The water gets diverted, but Imiko's friends are flushed away. Imiko tries saving them but gets dragged into the water. The villagers work with the bandits to save the girls, and Oga helps Sumo. They successfully save the girls and return them to their mothers. Toshi says he has to appoint a new samurai for Kakamucho, and he offers Jimbo the position. Jimbo says no and states that Hank is already the town's samurai. He and the villagers convince Toshi to let a dog be a samurai. Hank informs the people that he has to finish his training and says that Imiko should be the village's samurai. He gives her the samurai sword, and she gets on Toshi's horse as the people celebrate. She tells Toshi she wants to be the shogun, and he tells her it's not a bad idea. Hank and Jimbo continue their training while the townspeople leave. The end. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos and make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.